If you defeat me, I will call you my husband, human. Everyone was shocked by the alien queen's offer. The twin suns of Azura Prime hung like burning jewels in a sky so blue it hurt to look at directly, and beneath them, the grand arena buzzed with the kind of energy that preceded either history or catastrophe. Jax Torrin, senior announcer for the Azure Broadcasting Network, stood in his booth overlooking the crystalline structure and wondered if his career insurance covered death by royal embarrassment. 30 seconds to air, his producer chirped through the comlink, her voice artificially cheerful in the way that suggested she'd already drafted his replacement job posting. Jax adjusted his ceremonial microphone, an absurd device that was 50% functional technology and 50% decorative precious metals, and watched the arena floor below. The crystalline surface refracted light into dancing patterns that would have been beautiful if they weren't currently illuminating what appeared to be a cosmic joke in progress. We're living 3, 2. He took a breath and activated his warm professional voice. Citizens of the Azure Kingdom and honored guests from across the spiral arm, welcome to the 247th Annual Trial of Strength. The crowd roared on cue, 20,000 voices creating a sound that the arena's acoustic crystals caught and amplified into something almost physical. I'm Jax Torrin, and yes, before you ask, I've updated my will recently. That got a laugh. Good. He'd need the audience on his side for what was coming. As always, warriors from 14 star systems have gathered to test themselves against our kingdom's finest. We've seen magnificent displays today. The Krathen champion, with his molecular disruptor gauntlets, the Syrian twins and their fascinating approach to synchronized plasma combat, and of course the representative from Helix Station, whose jetpack malfunctioned so spectacularly that maintenance is still trying to extract him from the visitor section. More laughter. The Helix warrior had survived with only his dignity damaged, which made it fair game for commentary. But now, Jax continued, we come to our final match. The champion bout. The moment you've all been waiting for. He paused, milking the drama. Defending her title for the 20th consecutive year, undefeated in 143 official challenges, winner of the Stellar Combat Federation's Warrior of the Decade Award 3 times running, please welcome your queen, Tessara of House Azure. The sound that erupted made the previous cheering seem like polite applause. The arena shook. Small children covered their ears. Somewhere in the upper decks, someone's anti-gravity cushion gave out from the vibrations. And then she appeared. Queen Tessara didn't walk into the arena so much as she arrived, vaulting over the 20-foot barrier wall with the casual grace of someone hopping a garden fence. She landed in a crouch that cracked the crystalline floor, rose smoothly, and the twin suns seemed to shine specifically for her benefit. Her skin was the deep, rich blue of deep ocean water, and it caught the light like polished stone. The armor she wore was a masterwork of form and function. Plates of star silver alloy that bore the scars of actual combat, not the pristine ceremonial pieces worn by rulers who never fought their own battles. Her hair, dark as space between stars, was bound back in intricate braids woven with silver wire, and her ears, rising to elegant points through her hair, bore 5 silver rings each that chimed softly with every movement like tiny bells announcing danger. She was beautiful in the way that hurricanes were beautiful, something you could admire right up until it killed you. Tessara raised one hand, and silence fell across the arena like a curtain dropping. When she spoke, her voice needed no amplification. I stand ready to defend my crown. Who challenges? This was Jax's cue. This was the moment his career would either survive or become a cautionary tale told in journalism schools. He checked his notes one final time, confirmed that yes, this was actually happening, and activated his microphone. The challenger, representing Earth Sector, Independent Contractor License Number. He squinted at the registration form. Why is this written in pencil? Ahem. Please welcome to the arena, Kai of Terra. The silence that followed was the kind that preceded either enlightenment or apocalypse. Then someone in the crowd laughed, a single disbelieving bark of amusement. It spread like a virus. Within seconds, the entire arena was laughing. Not the pleasant chuckles from earlier, but the kind of laughter that came from genuine shock and disbelief. Because walking through the competitor's gate, looking for all the worlds like he'd taken a wrong turn on his way to somewhere significantly less important, was possibly the most unremarkable human Jax had ever seen. Kai of Terra was average height for his species, which made him slightly short by Azure standards. He wore armor that looked like it had been purchased from 3 different surplus stores and assembled by someone with an optimistic interpretation of matching. His sword, and Jax had to squint to confirm it was actually just a sword, not some technological marvel disguised as one, hung from his hip like an afterthought. He had dark hair that needed cutting, a few days' worth of stubble, and the kind of face that you'd forget 30 seconds after meeting him. He walked across the arena floor with his hands in his pockets. "Is he lost?" someone in the crowd shouted. "Did someone order food delivery?" More laughter. Even some of the other competitors waiting in the wings for the traditional post-ceremony celebrations were grinning. But Queen Tessara wasn't laughing. Jax noticed it from his booth, the way she'd gone completely still, her warrior's eyes tracking every step the human took. It was the stillness of a predator that had spotted something unexpected, something potentially dangerous. Beside her, Vorin the Chancellor appeared, his long ears twitching with the nervous energy that everyone in the palace had learned to recognize as a prelude to bad news. He leaned in, whispering urgently to the queen, his formal robes fluttering in the gentle breeze that carried the scent of ozone and anticipation. Tessara ignored him. Her focus remained locked on the approaching human. Kai reached the center of the arena, stopped about 20 feet from the queen, and finally took his hands out of his pockets. He looked up at her. She was taller by half a head, and tilted his head slightly, studying her with the same intensity she'd been directing at him. The crowd's laughter had faded into confused murmurs. This wasn't following the script. Challengers were supposed to bow, to show respect, to make formal declarations. This human was just standing there, looking at their queen like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Vorin tried again. "Your Majesty, perhaps we could—" Tessara raised one hand, silencing him without looking away from Kai. When she spoke, her voice carried across the arena with crystalline clarity. "If you defeat me, I will call you my husband, human." Jax dropped his microphone. In the crowd, 20,000 beings went from confused murmuring to shocked silence in the space between heartbeats. The other competitors stared. Vorin made a sound like a small animal in distress. Somewhere in the royal box, what sounded like an entire council of advisors began having simultaneous panic attacks. Kai blinked. Once. Twice. Then his face split into a grin that suggested he'd either completely lost his mind or was about to make things very interesting. "Do I get a health plan with that?" he called back, his voice carrying surprising well for someone without amplification. "Or is it just the title?" And that was when Jax knew, with the certainty of long experience, that this trial of strength was going to be one for the history books, assuming anyone survived to write them. The arena's silence shattered like the crystal walls themselves might under pressure. Half the crowd erupted in scandalized gasps, the other half in nervous laughter that didn't quite know if it was allowed. In the royal box, Chancellor Vorin clutched his chest as though his primary heart had just filed for early retirement, while his secondary heart seriously considered joining it. Queen Tessara's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Amusement, maybe, or the look of a chess player who just realized her opponent knew moves she hadn't anticipated. She drew her blade in one fluid motion, the star-silver metal singing as it cleared the scabbard. The sound triggered the arena's ancient response systems, and suddenly the air above the combat floor shimmered with holographic displays showing both fighters' vital statistics, projected betting odds, and, because the Azure people never did anything halfway, a small advertisement for a local restaurant. "Ceremonial positions," the arena's automated system announced in a voice that had been recorded 3 centuries ago and somehow never updated. "Combatants will observe traditional protocols or face immediate disqualification and moderate social embarrassment." Kai sighed, pulled his sword free, and moved into what Jax recognized from his reference materials as a standard Terran military salute position. It was technically correct, but had all the enthusiasm of someone filling out tax forms. Tessera, by contrast, flowed through the ceremonial forms like she was dancing, her blade tracing patterns in the air that left brief trails of ionized particles glowing blue-white in their wake. "Your Majesty," Varin hissed from the sidelines, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "You can't possibly be serious about the proclamation. The political ramifications alone are my concern, not yours," Tessera said without looking at him. Her gaze remained fixed on Kai, who had finished his salute and was now checking the edge of his blade with the critical eye of a craftsman examining a tool. "When was the last time we had a human competitor?" 73 years ago, Varin replied automatically. His encyclopedic memory for protocol and precedent was the primary reason he'd survived as chancellor through 3 administrations. He withdrew after the preliminary round when he realized the gravity differential was affecting his inner ear balance. We sent him a very nice fruit basket. And before that? "Your Majesty, I failed to see—" "Before that, Chancellor," Varin's ears drooped slightly. 212 years. She made it to the 3rd round before a Krathan warrior's plasma discharge gave her 3rd-degree burns. We compensated her medical expenses and offered her a position in the Royal Guard, which she politely declined. Tessera nodded slowly. "So it's been over 2 centuries since a human lasted more than one fight. This one walked into my arena knowing that. Knowing he'd be laughed at. Knowing the odds." She smiled, and it was the smile of someone who'd just been handed an interesting problem. Either he's the most foolish creature in 14 systems, or— The ceremonial gong sounded, its deep tone reverberating through the crystal structure and everyone's bone marrow simultaneously. The holographic display flashed from blue to red. The betting odds, Jax noticed with professional interest, were now running at 7,000 to 1 against the human. Kai shifted his weight slightly, blade held in a guard position that looked almost lazy in its simplicity. Tessera moved like lightning, deciding to take physical form. She crossed 20 feet in less than a second, her blade a silver blur aimed at the exact spot where Kai's neck met his shoulder. It was a testing strike, meant to gauge reaction time and defensive capability. The kind of opening move that revealed everything about an opponent in the first exchange. Kai wasn't there when the blade arrived. He'd shifted exactly 4 inches to the left, just enough that Tessera's strike passed through empty air, while his own blade came up in a deflecting parry that redirected her momentum. She spun with it, converting the motion into a low sweep that should have taken his legs out from under him. Kai jumped, not high. He wasn't showing off, just enough to let the blade pass beneath his feet. He landed, stepped back twice, and reset his guard. The crowd's laughter had died. 3 exchanges and the human was still standing, still conscious, still smiling slightly, like someone enjoying a moderately challenging puzzle. Tessera's eyes narrowed. She attacked again, this time without the testing gentleness. A combination strike that came from 3 angles in rapid succession, each blow powerful enough to shatter stone. Her blade work was textbook perfect, the kind of technique that got taught in military academies across the spiral arm as the example of how combat should look. Kai's technique looked like it had learned to fight in back alleys and bar fights, then gotten a discount education from whoever was available. It was economical to the point of stinginess, every movement doing exactly what was needed and nothing more. He blocked, deflected, and dodged with a precision that was either incredible luck or something else entirely. "He's reading her," Jax murmured into his microphone, temporarily forgetting he was supposed to be providing entertaining commentary. "He's actually reading her pattern." Tessera must have realized it too, because she suddenly changed tactics entirely. Instead of the flowing, graceful strikes she'd been using, she launched into a brutal series of power attacks, the kind that relied on Azure Physiology's natural advantages in strength and speed. Each blow hit like a kinetic strike from a military frigate. The 4th one caught Kai across the shoulder. Not a direct hit, he'd been turning away, but enough that Jax saw the spray of blood and heard the crowd gasp. The holographic display helpfully showed a medical readout indicating a laceration approximately 4 inches long and half an inch deep. Kai grunted, stepped back, and looked at his shoulder with the expression of someone who'd just discovered a parking ticket on his windshield. "Okay," he said, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "That one actually hurt. First blood to the defender." the automated system announced with inappropriate cheerfulness. Refreshments are available at concession stations on all levels. Tessara paused, blade held ready, watching him. You're injured. Will you yield? Kai rotated his shoulder experimentally, winced, then looked back at her with that same slight smile. You know what's funny? I just remembered I didn't actually read the rules before signing up. There's rules about yielding, right? Like specific conditions? You can yield at any time, Vareen called from the sidelines, his voice carrying hope like a drowning man clutching driftwood. We have excellent medical facilities, very advanced. The healing pods use quantum-entangled cellular regeneration, completely painless. You'd love them. Chancellor, Tessara said quietly. Vareen fell silent. Kai nodded thoughtfully. Right, but here's the thing. He adjusted his grip on his sword, and something in his posture changed. The casual, almost lazy stance tightened into something more focused. I'm a mercenary, been one for about 15 years now, and the first rule of mercenary work, the one they teach you before anything else, is that you don't take a job unless you're pretty sure you can finish it. He moved. This time he was the one pressing the attack. His strikes came fast and low, targeting not for kills but for position, driving Tessara back step by step. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't the kind of sword work that would get written about in epic poems. But it was effective, and more importantly, it was forcing the Queen of the Azure Kingdom to actually defend. The crowd had gone completely silent now, the kind of silence that contained multitudes of held breath and suspended disbelief. Tessara blocked, parried, and suddenly found herself giving ground for the first time in longer than she could remember. Her expression shifted from confident to something sharper, more focused, more alive. You're holding back, she said as their blades met and held, faces close enough to see each other's eyes clearly. So are you, Kai replied. His shoulder was still bleeding, staining his mismatched armor. I saw you pull that last thrust. It was aimed for my throat. Then you dropped it 6 inches. You noticed that? I'm observant. It's part of the job description. He pushed off, breaking the bind, and they circled each other slowly. So here's my question, Your Majesty. Do you actually want to fight me, or are you just going through the motions because it's tradition? Tessara laughed. It was a sound of pure delight that caused Vorin visible physical pain. Oh, she said, reaching up to the collar of her ceremonial armor, where a small device pulsed with soft blue light. I think we're past tradition now. Her fingers found the power regulator, the device that limited Azure strength to something approaching sporting fairness, and deactivated it. The armor plates began to glow. The armor's glow intensified until Tessara looked like she was wearing captured starlight, each plate humming with barely restrained energy. The holographic displays above the arena flickered and recalibrated, her power readings spiking into ranges that made several spectators in the expensive seats suddenly reconsider their proximity to the combat floor. Kai watched this transformation with the expression of someone who just ordered a mild curry and received something that could strip paint. Should I be worried? Probably, Tessara said, and the ground beneath her feet cracked as she launched forward. The difference was immediate and terrifying. Where before she'd been fast, now she moved at speeds that made her previous attacks look like she'd been working in slow motion. Her first strike hit Kai's hastily raised guard with enough force to drive him back 15 feet, his boots carving furrows in the crystalline floor. The impact sent a shockwave through the arena that rattled teeth and triggered several automated safety warnings. Warning, the arena's system announced with its usual poor timing. Combat has exceeded standard safety parameters. Spectators in rows A through F are advised to activate personal shielding or relocate to designated safe zones. Concessions will remain open. Jack, still in his announcer's booth and reconsidering every life choice that had led to this moment, managed to find his voice. Ladies and gentlemen, the Queen has just deactivated her power regulator, which for those unfamiliar with Azure physiology means she's now operating at approximately 300% normal capacity. For context, normal capacity once bent a military-grade blast door into abstract sculpture. Tessara pressed her advantage, her blade work becoming a silver storm that left after images in the air. Each strike carried enough kinetic energy to shatter stone, and she wasn't holding back anymore. This was combat as her people understood it. Total commitment, absolute focus, the kind of fight where hesitation measured the difference between victory and a lengthy stay in medical. Kai was losing ground fast. He blocked when he could, dodged when he couldn't, and took glancing hits that opened new cuts across his arms and chest. Blood spattered the pristine crystal floor, which the arena's cleaning systems would complain about later. His breathing had gone ragged, his movements were losing their earlier precision, and he looked exactly like what he was, a human trying to fight something beyond human limits. But he wasn't falling down. "He should be unconscious," Vorin muttered from the sidelines, his analytical mind warring with what his eyes were showing him. 3 of those strikes should have rendered him unconscious. 5 should have fractured bones. That last one should have... "But they didn't," Tessera said, and there was something in her voice that wasn't frustration. It was exhilaration. "He's adapting. Watch. He's not trying to match my strength. He's using momentum, angles, turning the force aside instead of meeting it directly." She was right. Kai had stopped trying to block her power strikes head-on. Instead, he was deflecting them by fractions of degrees, letting the enormous force slide past rather than through him. It was the martial arts equivalent of being a matador instead of a wall, and it was the only thing keeping him alive. "Okay," Kai gasped, backing away from another combination that would have decapitated a less attentive opponent. "New question. How long can you keep that up?" "Longer than you can keep breathing," Tessera replied, but she was smiling, the fierce, wild smile of someone finally challenged. "That's what I was afraid of." Kai's foot caught on one of the furrows his earlier defensive retreat had carved, and he stumbled. Tessera's strike came down like judgment, a devastating overhead blow that would end the fight, the match, and possibly several of Kai's major organ systems. Kai didn't try to block it. Instead, he did something that made Jax's professional combat analysis brain short-circuit momentarily. He stepped forward, directly into Tessera's guard, too close for her to adjust the angle of her strike. Her blade whistled past his ear, missing by millimeters, and suddenly they were standing chest to chest, both breathing hard, eyes locked. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Kai's blade came up, not striking, just pressing gently against the side of Tessera's neck, where the armor plates left a gap, not enough to cut, just enough to make the point clear. "Got you," he said quietly. Tessera's eyes widened fractionally. Her blade was out of position, momentum spent, and correcting would take a full second she didn't have. In that second, Kai could open her throat. The fight would be over. She'd lost the exchange. "Clever," she said, and there was genuine approval in her voice. Then she moved. What happened next would be analyzed in combat schools for the next decade and still generate heated debates. Tessera dropped her blade, simply released it mid-grip, and grabbed Kai's sword arm with her free hand. Her azure strength, still operating at 300%, allowed her to hold him immobile while she swept his legs with a move that was definitely not in any official combat manual. They went down together in a controlled fall that still cracked the crystal floor and came up with positions reversed. Tessera's retrieved blade at Kai's throat, his sword trapped beneath her boot. The crowd, which had been holding its collective breath, exploded into confused noise. "Was that legal?" someone shouted. "Does it matter?" someone else responded. "I'm not entirely sure what I just witnessed," Jax admitted into his microphone, "but I believe the technical term is improvisation under pressure, or possibly creative interpretation of combat protocols." Vorin looked like he was making mental notes for a very strongly worded memo about what constituted appropriate royal behavior. But Tessera wasn't paying attention to any of them. She was looking down at Kai, who lay on his back with her blade at his throat, bleeding from a dozen cuts, exhausted, clearly beaten, and still smiling. "That was a good move, he said. "Completely illegal in about 6 different combat sports, but good." "The trial has no rules about grappling," Tessera replied, "an oversight in the original regulations that I've exploited exactly 3 times in my career." 3 times? You fought 143 matches. Most opponents don't get close enough to make it relevant. She paused, studying him. "You're better than you look." "I get that a lot, usually right before someone tries to kill me." "I'm not trying to kill you." "Yeah, I noticed." That last strike? You turned the blade. Hit me with the flat instead of the edge. Kai coughed, winced. Appreciate that, by the way. My medical insurance doesn't cover bisected by royalty. Tessera's blade didn't waver, but something in her expression shifted. You noticed that too. Like I said, observant. He looked up at her, blood on his face, armor torn, completely at her mercy, and somehow still managing to look amused. So are you going to finish this, or are we going to keep having philosophical discussions while I bleed on your nice arena floor? She should have ended it, should have declared victory, accepted the crowd's adoration, and moved on to the ceremonial festivities. Should have sent this strange, observant, impossible human to medical and forgotten about him. Instead, she stepped back and lowered her blade. Get up, she said. Kai blinked. What? Get up. We're not done. Vareen made a sound like a small animal discovering it was actually in a much larger predator's food chain. Several council members in the royal box began furiously consulting rule books and precedent documents. Kai slowly pushed himself to his feet, retrieved his sword, and stared at her. You had me. Clean victory. Why? Because, Tessera said, and her smile was sharp enough to cut. You were right. I am holding back. And I want to know what you look like when you stop holding back too. She raised her blade in formal challenge position. After a long moment, Kai's expression changed. The slightly bemused, making the best of it look faded, replaced by something harder, more focused. He rolled his shoulders, adjusted his grip, and settled into a stance that looked nothing like the casual guard he'd been using before. Okay then, he said, but you asked for this. The arena fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of anticipation rather than shock. And Jax, microphone in hand, realized he was watching something unprecedented. Two fighters who'd each been testing the other, now finally, actually ready to fight for real. The change in Kai was subtle but undeniable. His stance shifted lower, weight distributed differently, and suddenly he looked less like someone stumbling through a fight and more like someone who'd been playing a very patient game. The blood still ran from his cuts, his breathing was still labored, but his eyes had gone cold and calculating. Tessera felt her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with exertion and everything to do with recognition. She'd seen this before, in the eyes of the most dangerous opponents, the moment when survival instinct gave way to something sharper. They moved simultaneously. This time, Kai didn't wait for her attack. He came in fast and low, his blade seeking gaps in her armor with surgical precision. These weren't the testing strikes from before, or the desperate defenses of moments ago. These were attacks from someone who'd been cataloging her patterns, measuring her reach, calculating angles while appearing to barely survive. Tessera blocked the first strike, deflected the second, and had to actually dodge the third because it came from an angle she hadn't anticipated. Her combat computer, the neural implant that every Azure warrior received at maturity, was suddenly painting threat assessments across her vision in colors it usually reserved for heavy weapons platforms. You sneaky bastard, she said, and it came out sounding almost affectionate. Mercenary, remember? Kai's blade scraped along her arm guard, searching for the joint. We get paid to solve problems. Sometimes the best solution is making people think you're not one. They exchanged a flurry of blows that moved too fast for most of the audience to follow. The holographic displays struggled to keep up, showing movement vectors that kept recalculating. Somewhere in the upper decks, a Syrian combat analyst was frantically recording everything for later study, already composing the thesis paper this would generate. Your footwork is Terran military, Tessera said, pressing an attack that forced Kai to give ground. But that strike pattern, that's Martian colonial style. And that last deflection was pure belter improvisation. I get around. Kai ducked under her swing and came up with a strike that actually made her activate her armor's emergency kinetic dampeners. You're using the traditional Azure technique, but you've modified it, added elements from Syrian blade work and something else I don't recognize. Krathan assault doctrine, she admitted, spinning to avoid his riposte. Picked it up from their war master 10 years ago. He lasted 8 minutes. That's a compliment coming from you. It was meant to be. They broke apart, circling. Kai was bleeding more freely now, his movements showing the cost of fighting beyond human limits. Tessara's armor had several new dents, and one of the plates on her left shoulder had cracked under the repeated impacts. Question, Kai said, breathing hard. When you made that offer, the marriage thing, was that just psychological warfare, or were you serious? Tessara's laugh echoed across the arena. Several council members in the royal box looked ready to dive under their seats. Does it matter? Kind of affects my retirement planning. Then fight better and find out. She attacked with renewed intensity, her enhanced strength making each blow a potential fight ender. Kai met her strike for strike now, no longer just surviving but actually pushing back. The arena floor was becoming a maze of cracks and furrows, the crystal structure groaning under the abuse. Safety systems kept triggering warnings that both fighters completely ignored. This is incredible, Jax breathed into his microphone, abandoning all pretense of professional objectivity. I've been announcing these trials for 14 years, and I've never seen anything like this. The human is actually matching her. Not in strength, he can't, but in technique, in timing, in sheer, stubborn refusal to quit. Voran, still at the sidelines, had given up on protocol entirely and was just watching with the horrified fascination of someone witnessing their carefully ordered world dissolve into chaos. If she actually goes through with the marriage declaration, he muttered to himself, the paperwork alone will take months. Do humans even have compatible legal systems? Do I need to file this with the interstellar courts? Is there a form for this? On the arena floor, Tessara executed a spinning strike that should have been impossible to counter. Too fast, too powerful, coming from an angle that left no room for defense. Kai did something that his Marine Corps instructors would have either awarded a medal for or court-martialed him over, depending on their mood. He dropped his sword, just released it, mid-combat, letting it clatter to the ground. Then he stepped inside Tessara's guard, caught her sword arm at the wrist and elbow with both hands, and used her own momentum to throw her. The Queen of the Azure Kingdom went airborne, sailed a good 15 feet, and hit the ground rolling. She came up in a crouch, eyes wide with surprise, and something that looked suspiciously like delight. You threw me, she said, sounding amazed. You actually threw me. Kai retrieved his sword, wincing at the movement. You're not the only one who can improvise. Also, I'm pretty sure I just pulled something important, possibly my entire spine. That was Jovian grappling, zero-gravity combat technique. Spent 2 years on Ganymede Station. The locals taught me some things between cargo runs. He settled back into his guard, swaying slightly. Mostly they taught me that humans should not try to out-wrestle people who grew up in low G, but sometimes you use what works. Tessara stood, brushing crystal dust from her armor. The glow of her power regulator was starting to dim slightly. Even Azure stamina had limits when operating at 300% for extended periods. How much longer can you keep this up? How much longer can you? Longer than you. Probably, but here's the thing about mercenaries. Kai shifted his weight, and despite the blood and exhaustion, his stance was solid. We don't have to win. We just have to not lose long enough to collect payment. And you already promised payment. I promised it if you defeat me. No, you promised it if I defeat you. Didn't specify how, didn't set a time limit. His grin was slightly manic now, edged with pain and adrenaline. So technically, if I can stay on my feet long enough for you to collapse from exhaustion, that counts. The crowd, which had been following this exchange with rapt attention, erupted in a mixture of laughter and incredulous cheers. Even some of Tessara's own warriors were grinning, though they tried to hide it when the queen glanced their way. Tessara stared at him for a long moment, then threw her head back and laughed, a genuine, full-throated sound of pure joy. You're arguing contract technicalities in the middle of a death match. Is this a death match? Because nobody actually specified that either. I just assumed trial of strength meant first blood or yield. It means whatever the defender decides it means. That seems like poor regulatory oversight. You should talk to your chancellor about that. Voran, overhearing this from the sidelines, made a note to update the trial regulations immediately after determining whether humans could legally marry Azure royalty and whether his health coverage included stress-induced cardiac events. Tessara deactivated her power regulator. The armor's glow faded to normal levels, and she rolled her shoulders as her enhanced strength ebbed back to merely superhuman levels. You're right. I could keep going until you collapse. It would be easy. But that's not what I want. She lowered her blade slightly, not a guard position, but not quite yielding either. I want to know if you're good enough to actually beat me, not outlast me, not get lucky, actually beat me. Kai looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he straightened, despite what it clearly cost him, and raised his blade to proper guard position. Then let's find out, he said. In the arena, the crowd, the announcer in his booth, and even Varan with his concerns about proper documentation all held their breath as the two warriors moved toward each other one final time. What followed wasn't combat in the traditional sense. It was a conversation written in steel and momentum, each strike a statement, each parry a response. Tessara moved with the grace her people were known for, but without the overwhelming power advantage. Kai moved like something held together by spite and determination, but with a precision that came from fighting when losing meant consequences more permanent than embarrassment. The twin suns had shifted position during the extended fight, and now their light came through the arena's crystal walls at angles that painted everything in shades of amber and rose. Dust motes and ionized particles from their clashing blades created a haze that sparkled in the light, making the whole scene look like something from an ancient hologram recording. You're favoring your left side, Tessara observed, her blade seeking the weakness immediately. You're favoring your right, Kai countered, deflecting and stepping through her guard to test the theory. She had to adjust her stance, conceding the point. Took a spear through that shoulder 6 years ago. Healed wrong. Got shot there 3 years back. Couldn't afford the good healing pods. He blocked high, riposted low, forced her to actually retreat a step. We're both fighting injured, basically. Everyone fights injured if they fight long enough. She caught his blade in a bind, twisted, but he rolled with it instead of resisting. They ended up core a core again, close enough to hear each other's breathing. The question is whether you quit when it hurts. I don't quit, Kai said. I occasionally make strategic relocations to alternate victory conditions, but I don't quit. That sounds like quitting with extra steps. That sounds like someone who's never been a mercenary. He pushed off, creating space, immediately had to duck a strike that would have opened his scalp. We prefer tactical flexibility. They separated, both breathing hard now. The holographic displays showed vitals that would have sent most medical professionals into panic mode. Kai's blood loss was approaching concerning levels. Tessara's stamina reserves, even without the power regulator active, were depleting from the extended high-intensity combat. In the announcer's booth, Jax had abandoned his prepared commentary entirely and was just narrating what he saw. They're both exhausted, both injured. By all tactical analysis, this should have ended 15 minutes ago, but neither one is backing down. The human's using the arena itself now. Watch, he's positioning himself so the sun's in the queen's eyes, and she's compensating by using the crystal reflections to track him. This is the kind of fight people write legends about. In the royal box, one of the council members leaned toward another. Do you think she's actually going to marry him if he wins? I think she might marry him even if he doesn't, the other replied, watching the queen's face. Look at her. When's the last time you saw her smile like that? Varain, overhearing this, briefly considered resigning his position and moving to a nice quiet colony world where the most exciting political event was annual farming subsidy negotiations. On the arena floor, Tessara executed a combination that should have ended the fight. A feint high, strike low, recover into a thrust that gave no room for counter. It was the same sequence she'd used to win her first championship 20 years ago, refined through decades of practice into something approaching perfection. Kai had seen her use it twice already during the fight, which meant he'd been counting. He sidestepped the feint without biting, dropped low under the strike, and instead of defending against the thrust, he attacked through it. His blade came up in a rising arc that forced Tessara to abort her attack and defend, which put her off balance for the first time in the entire fight. He pressed the advantage without mercy, driving her back across the arena floor with a series of strikes that were brutal in their simplicity. No fancy technique, no elaborate combinations, just relentless, efficient attacks aimed at her weak points with the kind of focus that came from fighting for survival rather than glory. Tessara defended, but she was giving ground steadily, her earlier confidence replaced by something sharper, more concentrated. This was what she'd wanted, to see what he looked like when he stopped testing, stopped surviving, and started actually trying to win. "There," Kai said, his blade finding a gap in her armor and drawing blood from her arm. Not deep, but enough. First blood to the challenger. Do we have a rule about that, or did you make up all the regulations as you went? "We have rules," Tessara said, and her grin was fierce. "They say the fight continues until someone yields or can't continue." "Of course they do." She counterattacked with renewed intensity, and suddenly they were both fighting at the absolute edge of their capabilities. No more conserving energy, no more testing. This was everything they had, thrown into a fight that had long since passed the point of sensibility and entered the realm of sheer stubbornness. The crystal floor beneath them began to show serious structural damage, small cracks spiderwebbed from every impact point. The arena's safety systems were now cycling through warnings in multiple languages, including one in ancient Azure that roughly translated to, "Please stop breaking our nice arena." "You know," Kai gasped between exchanges, "I'm starting to think you don't do things halfway." "My people have a saying," Tessara replied, blocking a strike that would have disarmed her a fight ago. "What's worth doing is worth doing until everyone involved questions your judgment." That's a terrible saying. And yet here we are. Their blades met with a crack that echoed through the arena, locked together at the guard. They stood there, arms trembling with effort, faces inches apart, both too exhausted to push the other back, but too stubborn to give ground. "I'm going to collapse in about 30 seconds, Kai admitted quietly. "I'm going to collapse in about 45, Tessara replied, "which means you still lose. Unless I do something really stupid in the next 29 seconds. "What could you possibly—" Kai kissed her. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't graceful. It was pure tactical desperation, a way to create an opening through sheer audacity when physical options had been exhausted. Tessara's eyes went wide with shock. Her concentration broke for exactly 1 second, and Kai moved. He swept her legs. She went down, and he followed, managing to get his blade to her throat before they hit the ground. They landed in a tangle of limbs and weapons, Kai's sword pressed against the gap in her armor, where neck met shoulder, both of them too exhausted to do anything but lie there breathing. The arena was dead silent. "Did he just—" someone in the crowd started. "He did," someone else confirmed. "Is that legal?" "I have no idea." "I'm not putting that in the official record," Varane muttered, already composing the carefully worded report in his head. On the ground, Tessara stared up at Kai, who lay half across her, sword at her throat, bleeding from a dozen wounds and looking like he might pass out at any moment. "That," she said slowly, "was the most undignified thing anyone has ever done in this arena." "Did it work?" Kai asked. She looked at the blade, at his exhausted face, at the impossible human who'd somehow fought her to a standstill through sheer bloody-minded determination and tactical flexibility that bordered on insanity. Then she started laughing. It started as a chuckle, built to full laughter, and didn't stop. It was the kind of laughter that came from finding something so unexpected, so absurd, so perfectly wrong that it became right. The crowd, uncertain how to respond, began laughing too, until the whole arena rang with it. "Yes," Tessara said finally, still laughing. "Yes, it worked. I yield." The arena erupted into chaos that made all previous noise seem like polite whispers. 20,000 beings found their voices simultaneously, creating a sound that the acoustic crystals hadn't been designed to handle. Several of them cracked. The automated systems gave up entirely and just started playing congratulatory music that clashed magnificently with the shouting. Kai rolled off Tessara and lay on his back on the shattered crystal floor, staring up at the azure sky and the twin suns, and seriously reconsidering every life choice that had led to this moment. His entire body felt like one large bruise with some cuts thrown in for variety. "I can't move," he announced to no one in particular. "I think I've forgotten how moving works." Tessara sat up, still laughing, and looked down at him. Her hair had come loose from its braids during the fight, falling around her face in a way that made her look less like a warrior queen and more like someone who just survived something ridiculous. You kissed me in the middle of a combat trial. Tactical improvisation. You're lucky I don't have you executed for that. You're lucky I didn't have to resort to my backup plan, which was? I hadn't actually thought that far ahead. Probably would have involved crying or begging, maybe both simultaneously. She offered him her hand. He stared at it for a moment, then took it, and she hauled him to his feet with strength that reminded him exactly why he nearly died fighting her. They stood there, both bloodied, both exhausted, while the crowd's noise washed over them like a physical force. By the ancient laws of the trial, Tessara said, raising her voice to be heard, witnessed by all present, I acknowledge defeat. The crowd's volume somehow increased. Vorin looked like he was calculating exactly how many regulations had been violated and whether there was enough paper in the kingdom to document them all. And by my oath, freely given before this fight began? Tessara paused, met Kai's eyes with an expression that was equal parts amusement and challenge. I acknowledge this human as my husband-to-be. If the previous noise had been chaos, this was apocalypse. People were screaming, cheering, shouting questions, and in at least 3 cases, fainting. The holographic displays gave up trying to show betting odds and just displayed error messages. Somewhere in the royal box, a council member knocked over an entire pitcher of ceremonial wine. Kai blinked. So that was serious? I don't make jokes about marriage contracts. That's more your style. She was still holding his hand, he realized. Did you actually think I'd make that offer if I wasn't prepared to follow through? I thought it was psychological warfare. It was. It was also a binding legal declaration under Azure law. She smiled at his expression. Welcome to politics, mercenary. Can I still back out? Absolutely not. You won. You're stuck with me. She turned to address the crowd, still holding his hand and raising it in the traditional victory gesture. Let it be known that Kai of Terra has proven himself worthy in combat. The marriage will proceed according to custom. Vorin materialized at Tessara's elbow with the desperate efficiency of a man trying to maintain some semblance of order in a universe that had clearly given up on the concept. Your Majesty, the legal requirements alone will take weeks to process. We need genetic compatibility assessments, cultural integration protocols, political alliance documentation. We have 6 months until the next trial, Tessara said calmly. That should be sufficient. 6 months? Your Majesty, the last royal wedding took 3 years to plan. Then we'll simplify. Kai, do you have any objections to a simplified ceremony? Kai looked at her, at Voran's panicked face, at the crowd still losing their collective minds, and started laughing. It hurt his ribs, which were possibly cracked, but he couldn't stop. You know what? I came here for the prize money. Thought I'd lose in the first round, collect the participation bonus, and be on my way. And now I'm apparently marrying a queen. The prize money is substantial, Tessara offered. Plus there's the royal stipend, housing, medical coverage. Does the medical coverage include psychiatric evaluation? Because I think I need one. It includes everything. We have excellent facilities. She leaned closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. Also, for what it's worth, that was the best fight I've had in 10 years. Maybe 20. You're infuriating and undignified and you fight like a cornered rat, but you're good. You're terrifying and you nearly killed me 6 different times, but you're honest. He paused. Also, for the record, this is the weirdest job I've ever taken. Is that a yes? Kai looked at her. Really looked at her. Azure skin still flushed from combat, long ears with their silver rings catching the light, eyes that held intelligence and humor, and the kind of strength that came from holding power without letting it corrupt. She'd offered him something absurd, fought him with everything she had, and laughed when he'd won through sheer audacity. You know what? Yes. Yes, it is. But I have conditions. Vorin made a strangled sound. Conditions? You can't put conditions on a royal marriage. What conditions? Tessara asked, ignoring him. First, I want that health plan in writing, with dental. Second, someone needs to explain to me exactly what I'm getting into here. because I'm about 70% certain I just accidentally conquered a kingdom. And third, he grinned despite the pain, I want a rematch in 6 months. No audience, no ceremony, just you, me, and an honest fight. Tessara's smile was brilliant. Done. Though I should warn you, I'll have 6 months to study your technique. I'll have 6 months to figure out how to not get killed. Should be interesting. Your Majesty, Varin tried again desperately. The council will need to convene. There are protocols. We need... Chancellor, Tessara said gently, take a breath. The kingdom hasn't collapsed. I've married my combat equal, which is exactly what the ancient traditions call for. Everyone will adjust. But he's human. So? So the political implications are a problem for tomorrow. Today, we celebrate. She looked at Kai. Can you walk? Not confidently, but I can try. Good enough. She kept hold of his hand as they turned toward the arena exit. The crowd parted like water, some still cheering, some still shocked, all of them staring at the impossible pair, the Azure Queen and the human mercenary who'd somehow talked his way into a kingdom. Jack, still in his booth, found his voice one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, in 247 years of trial history, we have never seen anything like this. The human challenger has defeated Queen Tessara, claimed victory, and apparently acquired a kingdom. I have no precedent for this. The refreshment stands are still open, and I believe we all need a drink. As they walked from the arena, Kai leaned slightly on Tessara, his injuries finally catching up to him. So, about that medical facility you mentioned, already called for transport. They'll have you in a healing pod within 10 minutes. And then we negotiate exactly what kind of trouble you've gotten yourself into. She glanced at him. Think you can handle being royal? I once negotiated a cargo contract between 3 warring factions while drunk, lost, and on fire. How much harder can palace politics be? So much harder. That's what I was afraid of. He paused as they reached the exit, looking back at the arena one last time. The crystal structure was damaged, the floor was shattered, and the holographic systems were still showing error messages. We really did a number on this place. We can afford repairs. We're about to have a royal wedding. The tourism revenue alone will cover it. You're going to monetize our wedding? I'm going to monetize everything. I'm a queen. It's in the job description. She looked at him with an expression that was somewhere between fond and exasperated. Get used to it, husband-to-be. You picked a fight with the wrong person. Or, Kai said, smiling despite everything, exactly the right person. The medical transport arrived, all soft lights and concerned technicians. As they loaded Kai onto the hover stretcher, Vorin appeared one final time, looking slightly calmer now that he'd had a few minutes to process. Your Majesty, I've begun preliminary documentation. The formal announcement will go out within the hour. I'll need to speak with Kai once he's medically cleared about integration protocols, security clearances, and approximately 400 other matters. Give him a day to recover, Chancellor. A day? Your Majesty, the Galactic Council will want statements, the press will have questions, we have visiting dignitaries who will be utterly confused. Then let them be confused. Tessara smiled. Sometimes confusion is good, keeps people honest. As the transport lifted off, carrying Kai toward medical care, in a future he hadn't planned on, he found himself laughing again. He'd come to the Azure Kingdom looking for quick money and a story to tell in bars. He was leaving the arena with a queen, a kingdom, and the distinct impression that his life had just gotten infinitely more complicated. But as he watched Tessara walking beside the transport, still in her battle-damaged armor, still smiling like someone who'd found exactly what she'd been looking for, he thought maybe complicated wasn't so bad. After all, he'd survived the trial. How much harder could marriage be? The end.